business is a hydrogen marine propulsion technology business. I had no idea that such a thing existed. He reached out the other day. Actually, he reached out because we had a bug with an onboarding form. He reached out and said, hey, look, I kind of can't access like all of the system right now, but I actually found 10 VC investors who are relevant to us that I had no idea about. And again, having really good conversations as a result, like that's a business called Aqua, so ACUA.
Yo, this is Christian D. Evans with Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to our amazing podcast. This is where we reveal the top 1% of business concepts and systems and processes to scale 8 and 9-figure businesses. We interview top-level 8 and 9-figure CEOs, business owners, and amazing TEDx speakers like David Meltzer. We got Nick Cavuto, Pascal Bachman, and so many others. And if you feel like this resonates with you, please share this with your friend, your family, and make sure you impact them as well, because we're trying to spread the message on those that do not know how to scale 8, 9-figure businesses and talking higher level business concepts. So guys, remember, enjoy the episode and be uncommon if you can. Cheers. Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host, as always, Christian D. Evans. And ShipShape or ShipShape. Guys, this is what I have on today. Let me do this intro again. Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host, Christian D. Evans, and today we have the CEO and founder of ShipShape. Now, many of you guys are going out there and wanting to get access to VCs, or maybe you guys are looking to investors, and you probably have done a whole bunch of cold email outreach. Maybe you've joined some communities and all this stuff, and the reality is like there's just so much, and takes so much time and energy, and having the wrong conversations with the wrong people that aren't really looking for your deal flow and not really looking for your opportunity, and so there's all this frustration, annoyance that many of us are facing. Well, that's the reason why I have this guy on. Now, they are actually based in the UK, and the reason why I wanted to have him on is because they speak to the right investors. What if you had a search engine that you could type in kind of the subject matter, what you're looking for, and directly talk to those people? They save time and increase efficiency with this platform. Really finding the relevant VC investors can take months, but that cut that process and collapse that time down so you can have that conversation with the right people that are looking for the right opportunity, and leverage your network as well with their introduction using our network overlay functionality. We're going to be diving deep into this and the infrastructure and really the massive potential growth of the US that they're having. Please welcome the CEO and co-founder, my friend, Daniel Sawko. How you doing today, Daniel?
Thanks so much, Christian, for having me on. Really excited to be here and to share what we're doing with ShipShape with the audience.
Yeah, man, I was looking at this platform here, and what's interesting to me is kind of the evolution. You know, you just it's started about 2 years or 2.5 years ago now, and you guys are really big over in Europe and really being able to help make that synergistic connection, right? We all know a lot of people have to be joining collaboration and, you know, communities and network and all this stuff, and it's cost money, but you guys created this search engine. So I'd love to ask, before we dive into all the intricate things and how you guys are able to add value to both of those ecosystems, Daniel, where did this idea evolve from? Where did that come from?
Yes, there are a couple of like foundational moments that led to this idea. One of those moments was actually when I was out in the US. I was lucky enough to be with a company that was part of the Morgan Stanley Multicultural Innovation Lab in New York. And the founder of that lab, a brilliant lady by the name of Carla Harris, spoke about why Morgan Stanley was setting up this lab. And it wasn't for reasons of wanting just to do the box tick exercise around multicultural strategy. It was around the fact that ultimately founders of businesses that are overlooked for funding actually represent a brilliant source of yield for investors, because if they're overlooked, then ultimately they're underpriced. And if you're looking at demographics or people from geographies that are overlooked for funding, ultimately you get a better deal for investors by sourcing deal flow from that area. And so that was one moment that sort of really helped to give me the idea for this. How do you make it easier for brilliant people from whatever background to identify which investors are interested in what they're doing? And I think the other the other sort of moment that led to this was that same business. The CEO and founder asked me basically to take a lead on the research for which VCs would be relevant. Now, that business, brilliant business, by the way, it automates tax compliance. So if you think about your like FATCA forms, for example, or like there's another one called CRS in the rest of the world, it's a real pain. And this business was solving for that for big banks. And so when you go speak with like with your bank, like basically making that process really, really easy. But the problem was, like, how on earth do you find which investors are interested in tax compliance automation in big financial institutions? Like, there's no search engine that you can go put that into. And that's really what gave me the idea, was the pain of struggling with investor lists, all of these like really static structured databases that are a bit like directories. They're kind of like yellow pages evolved into an internet version. And that's kind of where the world that funds innovation is stuck. It is stuck in this yellow pages 90s database ecosystem. And that's what we're here to change. We're here to basically enable the hydrogen propulsion system, marine technology, next generation newfangled thing, to be able to type that in and see which investors are interested in that idea or project.
See, this is what's so interesting, because see, I've talked to a lot of investors, and you're just exactly right. They're either joining these platforms where it's a charge to be part of that platform, to make that synergistic relationship between the deal flow and the investor, or you obviously, like you mentioned, the databases, right? You got databases of family offices or institutional investors or other investors, and you're just trying to do a lot of cold email outreach or some sort of outreach. And like you mentioned, I think that was a really good analogy, where you sort of realizing that it's so archaic and it's never been evolved, and so now I've been able to develop this search engine. So I want to talk a little bit about, Daniel, in regards to the evolution of that, being able to bring all this data. What does that technology look like in regards to building out that platform, so that it's bringing in and is that just in Europe, or is it all over the world? Or what does that look like in regards to both, hey, when they're doing a search, it's pulling, where's that data coming from for your platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you touched upon it as well, in terms of the fact that we don't charge. So we changed business model just over a month ago to be entirely free. So it's a search engine. And if you think about other brilliant search engines that are out there, so if you think about Google, Google is indexing lots and lots of raw, unstructured content and making it searchable for you. So if you're looking for a local babysitter, or like a pet hotel to go drop your cat or dog off, Google can bring that amazing unstructured information to you and answer your questions. And we're doing the same from an investment standpoint. So we're indexing like investor websites, we're indexing their portfolio companies, like where have they made investments. And yeah, for the moment, we kind of had to start somewhere. So we decided all of the investors that have made investments in the UK. So we get some US investors in there. So some really big names that have ultimately, got a presence on both sides of the pond. And then also just across the channel as well. So in Europe, we've got a number of investors that we're indexing to. But so for the moment, we're largely focused on UK-centric view of the world, but we're changing that rapidly. So we are going to be coming over to the US in the coming months in terms of bringing in that data set and making the US both searchable and investors findable.
Now on ShipShape.VC, which is your website, there's got a lot of amazing good content there, where there's a nice little video that's able to explain that and how to really optimize this platform. But for those that will go to ShipShape.VC after this podcast, for those that are listening, but for those that want to understand a little bit about how to really optimize your platform, whether they're a VC looking for investors or whether they're an investor looking for deal flow, let's kind of unpack that a little bit further. How would they go about doing that?
Yeah, great question. So and to be fair, like the answer to the first one, finding investors, you would basically describe what your business is doing. So if you're a business that's doing something in open banking, that's a pretty good place to start. If you're doing something to do with, I don't know, solar panels or lithium ion battery technology, all of these like descriptors of what your business is actually doing are great places to start. Or even if it's like, if you're a dog training app, like that actually is a really good place to start. So like you almost and this is something that we've had to we've had to learn about our user base is that everyone in this world has been trained around this like yellow pages model where everyone is using like these NAICS codes to try and navigate. So like you're a fintech, you're a green tech, like that's the way that we are describing ourselves. And that's actually a big problem. Like you're not a fintech or a green tech. You're actually doing something much more specialized and niche. And so having to unlearn that habit of saying, oh yeah, I'm a B2B SaaS company, having to unlearn that habit is really important. And so yeah, use it like a search engine. Describe what your business actually does, and you'll be amazed at which investors are talking about it, and also which companies that have already been invested in exist. So you can look for collaborators, you can look for competitors, and obviously it's really helpful if you're looking for investors. Ultimately, you don't want to be going to an investor that's just invested in your competitor. So we make all of that information essentially there, it's searchable. And with regards to how investors can find deal flow, so not just you can do it not just via searching which investments have already been made. So if you're looking to do Series A or onwards, it's a great way of finding which companies have already had some backing. But also we turn the searches that startups have done via our search engine into a source of deal flow for those investors. So you could be a startup doing something, I don't know, like federated learning, and an investor could think, you know what, that's exactly where I want to be putting my money. They can get essentially anonymized search information from us and say, I don't know which founder did that search, but I want to have a conversation with them about doing their 5 million seed round. And that's the way that we enable investors to discover new technologies in areas that they had no idea about. And we want to flip the model on its head. Every platform out there kind of focuses on enabling investors to do research about startups. But I don't know about you, if a bank contacts me about a mortgage and I'm not ready for one, I'm not going to go and have a conversation with that bank about a mortgage that I don't need. Like the point in time that I want to be having a conversation with a bank is when I want a mortgage. And if you're a startup that wants to raise, that's the point in time that you want to have that conversation with an investor.
You mentioned something very interesting. I love that analogy, by the way. You're not going to go to a broker if you're not in the market to get a mortgage. It's the same thing with investors, right? A lot of investors maybe aren't liquid, whatever that story is. Maybe they're just not looking for your deal flow, and they're looking for XYZ kind of deal. And the thing is, like you mentioned, you're able to collapse that time frame. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about kind of maybe a few case studies, maybe some individuals that you've seen that have been able to leverage this platform, that, hey, now you're able to make that synergistic relationship very quickly. They're in the right time, the right place. They know exactly what they're looking for. And I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about how some people have used your platform and see kind of the serendipities of the results of it.
Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, would be delighted to. There should be two just in the last week, which have sort of come out of the blue. They were founders who reached out to us just to say thank you. So one of those is a founder called Tom McKenna. He is the founder of a startup called Ocular. And what Ocular do is they enable businesses to optimize their pricing. So it optimizes their websites. It helps them with optimizing pricing in their catalog. And it's a brilliant business that uses artificial intelligence. It's also scouring the web. And yeah, they use the search engine. They were able to identify, they'd already done like a long list of VCs that they wanted to speak with. But using our search engine, they identified another 10 that was super relevant. And at the time when they reached out, they really said like, hey, look, we're already speaking with 2 that we've identified within like a 48-hour turnaround. We're speaking with them. And one of them actually asked, how on earth did you find out about us? Because you are perfect for our thesis. But really, how did you find out about us? So that was a really brilliant moment. And another one is with founder of a, let me make sure I get this right, because it's super long tail, super niche. And like, that's what I love about this business. So this business is a hydrogen marine propulsion technology business. I had no idea that such a thing existed. He reached out the other day. Actually, he reached out because we had a bug with an onboarding form. He reached out and said, hey, look, I kind of can't access like all of the system right now, but I actually found 10 VC investors who were relevant to us that I had no idea about. And again, having really good conversations as a result, like that's a business called Aqua. So ACUA. Yeah, Mike Tinmouth at Aqua reached out and said, hey, look, found 10 VCs who are interested in this space. And it would have taken me ages otherwise to go and find who on earth is interested in hydrogen marine propulsion systems. That's what I absolutely love about this. It is as you pointed out, we're aligning interests really much earlier than in the natural journey of progression for either the founder or the investor to find each other via today's means of personal networks and crappy cold emails.
I appreciate this. Now, let me ask you, so in that case study, okay, let's unpack this. How did they use that platform? Did they type in that search engine, high propulsion, or what did that look like in regards to kind of the criteria?
Yeah. I'll walk you through it. So the way the way that it was used is literally just typed in hydrogen marine propulsion systems. Then you run a search, and essentially what the system will do is it will identify which individuals at which investment entities are talking about that topic. It will also identify which investment entities have got portfolio companies that are in that space or related spaces. So you can very quickly build that heat map up of, okay, I know that it's not the whole universe of VCs and investors that are interested in the space, but who is the relevant universe? Who should I concentrate my time with in terms of networking, in terms of building that relationship, and ultimately in terms of the outreach? So a bit like with Google, we don't pick up the phone and say, hello, Mr. Investor or Mrs. Investor, here's a perfect startup for you. We don't do that, but we do provide the contact information of that investor. And what's really cool there is actually investors are 7 times more likely to reply to outreach that references why that outreach is valid and relevant. So if you can reach out to an investor saying, hey, I saw that you're interested in how do we keep autonomous vehicles at sea. Yeah, how can we make fuel where we are? If you can reference an article that someone's written about that topic and then say, we're solving this problem, that investor's going to reply. And that's the way that's the beauty of this is we actually don't need to get involved. We're not going to be middlemen. We're not charging either side of that equation. All we're doing is putting the right information in the hands of the right person.
This is interesting that you're mentioning this because, again, it's all about really being able to be contextual with the outreach, but also really getting the right data. So when you're building this platform, the search engine, is it pulling data for like the investors specifically and the VC deal flow? Where's that pulling that data from? Is that just, kind of scouring the internet in the UK area and being able to bring all that together, like you mentioned, whether it's articles or investment thesis, et cetera? What does that look like?
Yeah, a great question. So yes, it's exactly that. We're pulling from a whole host of open source information feeds. So whether that's websites or like things like social, even podcasts now. So yeah, we should definitely be indexing your podcast and making sure that investors, etc., and indeed founders in future as well, that when you're interviewing them, that we're indexing that and making sure that ultimately those in the ecosystem who are searching for these topics are able to find who is it who's talking about it, who is it that's relevant for us to go speak with. So yeah, we're indexing from, yeah, we've created essentially a geographic cordon, and that cordon will be expanding, and that's where we're indexing from at the moment, and in a very similar way to the way that Google does it.
Now, let me ask in regards to the trajectory of really the massive explosion in regards to the US market as well, because you're very big in the UK. You've been able to make these synergistic relationships, like you mentioned, the serendipities of it. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about kind of the evolution of where it's going to go, ShipShape.VC, in regards to the US market and other international markets as well.
So by our estimates, the US market is about 7 times the size of the UK. So for every niche search phrase that's already finding investors interested in that in the UK, you can imagine that there are going to be 7 times more in the US. So what that enables is something really, really interesting. And actually what I think is what I think for the future of essentially like open societies and the Western world, what I'm really excited about is the fact that we're going to have a brilliant idea crop up, let's say in a relatively obscure region in Central Europe, for example, and it will be in something I don't know, like quantum cryptography, and they will be able to find investors, like let's say in Little Rock, Arkansas, who potentially want to fund projects in that space. Like that's the capability of making the long tail longer. So the more investors we're adding in, the more search phrases that are being driven through the search engine, the better that society can become, because ultimately we're reducing innovation cycles by making sure that people with brilliant ideas find people with brilliant money that want to back those ideas. And that's ultimately what we want to do, is transform the way that the world works when solving problems.
I love what you just said there. I thought that was a really cool, brilliant ideas with brilliant money, and then making that synergistic relationship. Now, let me ask you this, because we talk a lot about VC a little bit, and as well as, and that's a lot of times either pre-rev, depends upon obviously the deal flow, or maybe pre-seed a little bit. Do you also work with, maybe private equity in regards to, hey, those that are in growth stage, that maybe have like already some traction in that company, and they're looking for, full acquisition or majority acquisition? I would imagine very similar structure, having that synergistic relationship with those investors or with those kind of people that are looking for that kind of deal flow.
So the answer to that is not yet. So like the majority of searches that are being done, I guess you have like almost like a normal distribution of that. That said, PE and venture have the same fundamental problem when it comes to marketing capital. It's difficult to do. How do you put your hand up and say, we're the PE firm that truly understands how to get maximum growth out of a business? Let's say, I don't know, if you take as a brilliant US startup, which I watched a documentary on the other day called Spin Launch. There might be a PE firm out there that is the best at commercializing ideas for space. So yeah, a little bit about Spin Launch. Spin Launch is basically, it's an awesome catapult for satellites. So they basically create a vacuum on Earth. They spin this wheel around, and essentially there's what looks like a projectile at the end of it with a satellite on it, and they're able to much more cost effectively project satellites into space. But let's say that you are the PE firm for that type of company. You got two ways around this. The problem, one is you either find out who Spin Launch are and you build that relationship up well in advance. That's perhaps the way that some PE firms would go. Or you just make sure that you're well enough known in the market that actually space technology businesses should come to you because of the content that you're producing that shows that they're relevant. In the same way that you discover, I don't know, via Google, you might type in whatever your niche need is. Like, if you want to go out boating in Florida, like you might want to buy like a pleasure boat. You would type that into Google, and if you are doing enough to index high, you then get traffic. And it's the same concept. We think that money needs to do a better job of marketing itself, and we're enabling that.
Yeah, because you see, even within the communities that I'm part of, whether it's investor platforms or VC or PE or deal flow or whatever it is that you have access to, you're paying X amount of dollars to get access to this network. You're having these conversations, and at the end of the day, you're still looking for investors, or you're looking for deal flow that are in kind of the right stage, right? And so there's a lot that goes into it. And what's interesting, what you're mentioning, and I think I want to reiterate this and put stop on this, because I've worked with databases, I've worked with cold email outreach, I've worked with just having conversations. And don't get me wrong, like I'm not in a big rush or anything, but there are people that have like certain criteria, as well as like a timeline. It's like, hey, we have to raise $50 million this quarter, otherwise we need to get to that next stage and that valuation, and there's a lot of that stress. And so this really, like you mentioned, simplifies it. Now, one of the functionalities of your platform, you say, is the network overlay functionality. I'd love for you to just describe that, because it's leveraging your network to make these warm intros. Help us understand that a little bit better and how people can use that.
Yeah, so this is a feature that we one of the first features that we actually developed. And it was in response to big organizations that wanted to leverage their own network. So if you take like I don't know, one of the big four or an investment bank, they've got a team of people that work in that bank, and they've each got their own little, their own book of contacts. And the problem in today's world is Harry might be working on a project or a deal, and he might identify which investors they want to get in touch with. And the problem that Harry's got is, how does he recognize which contact or individual or colleague within his own organization has a connection or the best route, warm route through to that investor? So this is an overlay feature. So we basically enable organizations, or indeed startups can do it too. It's basically there's a feature to enable, you can upload your CSV of your CRM, or like let's say that LinkedIn's your personal CRM. You can overlay that in, and the bigger your team gets, the more you can identify warm routes in to those individuals that you want to get in touch with. So not only are you going in with context-rich, specific reason for going to go speak with that person, actually you can do it via a warm intro too. And that's the beauty of that feature. There are others that are doing a really good job of this that will actually look to integrate in future. So like you've got Bridge, who like have this awesome networking feature. So we'll probably look to utilize someone else's brilliant work in this regard, because CRM CSV upload is great, but actually there are some really cool other applications for doing this elsewhere.
See, this is so important because I remember getting access to a database, and we had to run some cold email because I work with a private equity to raise certain capital for B2B enterprise. And I mentioned this offline, but the thing is I remember we had to do a lot, and I use my podcast as my acquisition a lot of times, just be very transparent and, having conversations, because it's all about relationships. But one of the things that I found so interesting is the power of warm intros, right? When all of a sudden, because they're most likely, like you mentioned, when you're being a little bit more contextual with your outreach, that's 7 times more likely that that investor will respond, or that, deal flow, whoever that is that you're talking to, will respond. Well, when you do a warm intro, it's almost like a 90%, right? Where, hey, they're most likely, definitely, if they have some leverage, if they already know who that person is, it's a very, very warm intro. And I'm part of some communities where I'm able to reach out and have that. And it's really nice that you guys have that overlay, and you guys have built that infrastructure. And again, just really, really solid stuff, because again, all these different tactics and strategies. And Daniel, I love to just talk a little bit about kind of like, you've got this huge, beautiful platform. You're exploding over in the US. You built it really big in the UK. Just tell me like the larger vision, man, because again, you see the power behind it. I guess really my question is when you went from paid platform to now just a free platform, why was that? And how do you guys monetize it? How do you guys really be able to get the valuation from this search engine?
Yeah, it's a great question. So to start with, the reason for shifting model and pivoting, and I think most businesses will pivot, especially in the early stages. So we basically did it for 2 reasons. One of which was it didn't actually fit that comfortably with why we started the business. So we were charging subscriptions, enterprise subscriptions, and that was just not great, because it basically meant that we were putting access to that information behind a paywall that ultimately those most in need couldn't afford. And for us, ethically, that didn't actually sit that well. We were doing this ultimately to try and change the way that this industry functioned. And so by trying to charge a subscription that was inaccessible for most, because we needed to cover costs and there's a sales cycle, putting it behind a paywall just wasn't going to work. And we also didn't really want to go through that enterprise sales process. Every sale to another business can turn into an enterprise sale length process. It is really long. You need to hustle. You need to be in there at multiple touch points. And ultimately, we're not set up to do that. We are an R&D intensive search engine business that is utilizing data science to reveal brilliant value from insights. The best way of essentially I suppose, monetizing those insights actually isn't by charging startups or investors to use the search engine. It's actually by monetizing through the data that we collect on the back of that. So where, like, which specific technology areas have the biggest shortages in innovation funding? This is a key question for in the States, in the UK, all over the world. Which technology areas have got the biggest gaps with regards to private market funding? It's a big problem. And also, like, the way that capital is deployed today, whether that's PE, VC, or even in angel space, everyone is just kind of sticking the finger in the air and saying, "Oh, I want to put some money into Web 3.0." But actually, where's the demand for capital coming from? So for us, being able to surface that level of insight, okay, like, yeah, this year, renewable technologies had a demand of like 1.8 billion. The market was only going to satisfy like 100 million. Being able to surface that level of insight is super valuable. And one of the best reasons for us going free is ultimately we start getting that type of insight because the coverage of the market becomes statistically significant. And so, yeah, we're getting there in the UK, and ultimately we want to be able to bring that to the US as well. The more data we're getting in, actually the value of that data set and being able to know specifically what these businesses are doing becomes extremely valuable, not just for investors, but also, you know, for banks, for lawyers, for accountants, investment banks as well. Like, they are all ultimately looking to derive value and know where they should be, not where they are. And we also ultimately want to change the way that discovery and deal flow works in this world, away from that network-based model. You've got to go to a conference to go and network with and expand your network. Like, we basically want to enable the law firm that specializes in stem cell research FDA approval process. We want to enable that law firm to discover the brilliant startup that's coming out of Texas to go and do that and ultimately change the world. So it's not just around investment. Our ambition for this is global, and it's not just in the world of investment. It's also adding in the advisors, the professional services. How can we optimize the world for faster innovation?
This is so incredible. And the reason why is because so many individuals, when Google first came out, we really didn't understand the power of search, right? And then obviously now it becomes so integrated with our day-to life, right? Where it's location and, you know, food places near me and XYZ near me and whatever, right? Becomes so natural. It's the same thing. I was talking to someone the other day where she created this amazing community for deal flow, specifically in Florida, right? For raising capital, for, you know, SaaS world, et cetera. And, you know, investors felt, you know, comfortable investing into that region. Same thing with their another individual I talked to, where their investment criteria is only Latin America, and they're trying to attract investors that have a heart for Latin America. But like you mentioned, instead of reaching out to a whole bunch of people on a database and that old, you know, adage and having a ton of conversations, and they may not, you know, kind of filter in with your or align with your investment criteria or thesis. Now you're able to, just like you mentioned, and why I keep saying this is because you're revolutionizing the whole industry. You revolutionize, like you mentioned, and integrating. This is just phase one or phase two of a huge, massive global takeover in a good way, and really revolutionizing this industry, which I just think it's so awesome that you guys are doing this. But also, I love what you did. I think that's why it's so important to hear and understand your values as the CEO and founder, Daniel, at ShipShape, is bringing that cost of entry basically zero, where it's free, so people that actually need it the most have access to it, so that they can obviously grow and take it to the next level. And I just I want to foot stop and just say, hey, that is awesome. It really shows a lot with what you guys have, definitely you as a team at ShipShape, and you know, your value base. I appreciate you just being on today, talking about this higher level. I know a lot of our audience are probably like, hey, how do I get access to this? How do I get part of this? How do I get my index on there? How do I, you know, be part of this ecosystem, this platform? How do they reach out to you, bud, and get on this platform, bud?
Yeah, so in terms of accessing the platform, ShipShape.VC, you go there, you'll see a search bar. If you you'll get there'll basically be a top right hand corner, there's a sign in / sign up button. Click on that, you'll get unlimited free searches via doing that. You can also use the search bar as it is. You don't need to sign up, but that gives you less searches. But if you sign up, yeah, you'll get unlimited searches. Yeah, really happy to connect and expand you know, network in the US. it is our next big market. So yeah, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. So it's Daniel Sawko, that's Sierra Alpha Whiskey Kilo Oscar. Please do reach out. Would love to hear your thoughts both on our appearance on this podcast, but also, yeah, would also welcome feedback and where you know that actually there are other founders in the US who might want to hear about what we're doing.
And guys, those links will be in the description below. So make sure you stop what you're doing. And it's a beautiful search engine. You literally just copy, paste this into your URL so that you can, of course, just, try it out. And like he mentioned, there are certain keywords and you just constantly test, adjust, modify, and you'll find a whole bunch of people, whether it's deal flow or investors to, connect, collaborate, have a conversation. Daniel, again, I appreciate you being on here. I'll add his LinkedIn account down here as well. So you can reach out to him that way. And Daniel, I always love to ask my guests, before I let you go fully, is there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I guess for the founders out there, take some time out. You'll be amazed at what you can do after a little bit of time out, and you'll be amazed at how much you didn't realize that you need it. So like I always try and take weekends off at the very minimum, but definitely recommend give yourself a length of time out. I realize that especially in the US, like there's just a tendency to take fewer days holiday. I think there's a productivity gain big time if you're a founder and you can give yourself the breathing space to make better big cool decisions, right? I think there's an amazing study done just after the first Gulf War where actually they realized that like 95% of the errors made by the US Army in the first Gulf War were as a result of ultimately sleep deprivation and not having had like any proper R&R. So giving yourself R&R actually means that you are far less likely to make catastrophic decisions. And I don't know about you, I wouldn't want to get in the car being driven by someone who hadn't slept in a week. And ultimately, if you're in charge of a business, you're driving a car with a lot of passengers, whether that's your investors, your colleagues, and your customers. Like that's the way that we think about it here, and we've benefited massively from taking that approach.
That is some immense amount of wisdom, and you're very young, vibrant, and knowing that wisdom at that age, that's beautiful. I really appreciate you being on here, man. That is the co-founder and CEO of ShipShape.VC, my friend, Daniel Sawko. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Until next time, be uncommon if you can. Yo, this is Christian D. Evans, Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. We thank you so much for listening to this amazing episode. If you feel and you know that this was valuable to you, please show some love to our amazing guest by liking this, by commenting on this, by making sure that you do a nice 5-star review and just show some love to our guest. That'd be really awesome. Also, make sure you share this with a friend, a family, a colleague, someone that you believe would bring value to their life right now. And guys, we just want to say thank you again for just being part of our community. If you want to have more resources, don't be afraid. Go to christiandevans.com. You can actually schedule a phone call with me, or you can send me an email at christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. That's christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. Always love to hear some feedback and let me know what is the number 1 or 2 things that you are struggling in your business and your life, and we'll make sure we have those conversations. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast, and until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can. Cheers.